missing librarian. A forgotten typewriter ribbon. A page of mysterious notes. And a diary full of incriminating allegations. But no body. Can the police make a murder charge stick nonetheless? Enter the world of forensic science, the science of crime, where a suspect's guilt or innocence can hang on a single piece of evidence. In big cities, people go missing all the time. Toronto police can get as many as 10 or 15 missing persons reports on any given day. But some cases are more suspicious than others. The case involving Susan O'Neill and Robert Addie Adamson is suspicious right from the start. Toronto Police Constable Emerson Finn is the first to be called in.
Well, first of all, we want to make sure it's a missing person, not somebody who just doesn't want to be found. A lot of people just don't want. They go off, and it's not that they're missing, just that somebody can't find them and feels they're missing.
The missing couple's neighbors tell Finn a story he will later hear repeated by Susan's co-workers at the local library. That Susan's aunt recently died in Sault Ste. Marie, a 12-hour drive north of Toronto. Susan's common-law husband, Addie, has left word that he and Susan have gone up there to look after the aunt's estate. But that was 2 weeks ago. Investigators searched the couple's East End Toronto home.
Just in immaculate condition. There was nothing broken, nothing out of place. We could find no indication of anything sinister having taken place there. It was just a normal home.
Investigators learned that Susan O'Neill is a warm, family-oriented woman with a close circle of friends. She and Addie, a real estate developer, have been together for 8 years. They have a golden retriever named Quasar. The couple is devoted to Susan's father, a retired lawyer who lives in a nursing home nearby. They visit him at least twice a week. But no one at the nursing home has seen or heard from the couple in 14 days. Susan's father is terribly worried. Finn widens his search, notifying the Ontario Provincial Police, contacting hospitals in Toronto and Sault Ste. Marie, even calling the morgue. He gets nowhere. He starts to wonder if the couple is still together.
We did receive information from 1 or 2 sources that indicated there was a bit of a problem in the relationship, and possibly it would have been broken off in the next short while. And one of the aspects you have to look at is maybe she just had enough and up and left.
Susan O'Neill's address book confuses investigators. If Susan had an aunt living in Sault Ste. Marie, why are there no Sault Ste. Marie listings? Police learn that Susan does have an aunt who lives in Ohio. When they contact her, she tells police that she is the only aunt Susan has. Something doesn't add up.
The common-law husband was the only person anybody had spoken to. Susan had not contacted any of her friends to relate the story of her going north.
Fearing the worst, Finn calls homicide. Forensic Identification Officer John Badowski is dispatched to the missing couple's house.
What I'd been asked or tasked with is to ascertain, is there a crime scene here, and if so, what is the nature of the crime? Having walked through the house once, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. I did lead a very intrusive investigation, looking at every photo album in the house, into reading her personal diary, reading personal letters.
Badowski learns that Susan was once very much in love with her husband. "I am happy and profoundly grateful to be with Addie," she wrote. But over the years, things between them have changed. Addie has been unemployed for some time. His life now revolves around the radio and the TV. He rarely finishes what he starts. The least setback, and he's ready to give up the whole project, Susan wrote. Police are now desperate to talk to Addie, but they still have no idea where he is. Veteran homicide detective Steve Reeser joins investigator Finn in the search for Susan and Addie.
I still felt strongly that she was missing and he was responsible somehow for her being missing. Whether she was dead or not, I didn't know. I mean, for all I knew, she was locked up somewhere in some cabin, and who knows? I had no idea, what had happened to her.
Police get the break they need from Susan's aunt in Ohio. When the aunt learned of her niece's disappearance, she contacted her estranged husband, Arnold. Arnold had no idea where Susan was, but he did know of Addie's whereabouts. Addie showed up at Arnold's Ohio farmhouse 5 days after Susan went missing. He said he and Susan had broken up because he was traveling too much for business. Addie seemed in no hurry to leave, even going so far as to set up a makeshift office in Arnold's living room.
We felt very strongly that there was a necessity to go down there and invest that time and effort into at least sitting down with him and talking to him about the circumstances under her missing and where she might be.
When the police contact Arnold, he says he too is concerned about Susan and that Addie is in Florida, but he's due back soon. The minute Steve Reeser hangs up the phone in Toronto, he is busy making travel plans of his own. He's got a few questions for one Robert Adamson. At Susan and Addie's house in Toronto, ident officer John Badowski uses ultraviolet light to detect traces of organic matter, such as blood or other bodily fluids. It's his first time using this forensic technique. He experiences a breakthrough.
There was an immense amount of what appeared to be spatter up and down the staircase. It shocked me. My initial reaction was, wow, I've got it right here.
The overall effect suggests carnage on such a huge scale that Badowski is forced to question his findings and seek out a second opinion. The conclusion is much less dramatic than he had thought.
It was just simply organic material being tracked in from the grass and from the rain by the dog. And that was the end of the mystery.
Toronto police catch up with Adamson at a detention center in Ohio, where he's being held by U.S. immigration for false entry into the country. Emerson Finn, the original investigator on the case, accompanies Detective Reeser to the interview.
He was a little different, a little strange, a bit of a con man, a little flaky, if I could say that.
Adamson tells them one story after another.
He started off by denying any knowledge of Susan's whereabouts. Later on, he changed his tune and said he'd had a fight with Susan and gone out for a walk. And when he came back, the doors were open and Susan was gone and he knew she was dead. They had taken her and we said, well, who'd taken her? And he said, well, I'd been involved in a land real estate deal with some Montreal mafia types. And I lost millions of dollars for them and they were going to get even with me. And when I come back and she was gone, I knew they had taken her and killed her. And it's just such an incredible story. It was totally unbelievable. But that was his story. He stuck to it.
The interview lasts 4 hours. When it's over, investigators ask Adamson to return to Canada voluntarily. He declines. Addie will have to be deported. At Susan's house in Toronto, ident officer Badowski logs countless man-hours. The more time he spends alone in the house, the more committed to the investigation he becomes.
In my heart, I knew something was wrong, and I felt that I owed it to her, even though I never met her, but this was my job anyways, was to act in the interest of her.
In Susan's later diary entries, Badowski discovers more dark secrets about her common-law husband. Adamson had stolen thousands of dollars from Susan's father's bank account, which Adamson had then invested in lottery tickets. There's such a consistent pattern of lying that I'm afraid to admit it to myself, Susan wrote. I feel trashed, used, unloved, dead inside. How ironic. The more he takes from me, the more he hates me. At Susan's uncle's farmhouse in Ohio, Steve Reeser is also making some important discoveries. Among Adamson's belongings, Reeser finds one particularly intriguing set of notes. The notes include the names of several cities and a Chicago funeral home. Using Adamson's hotel receipts, Reeser and Finn retrace the route Adamson must have taken from Toronto. Police learn that within days of Susan's disappearance, Adamson turned up at Susan's father's bank with a typewritten letter on Susan's stationery. It authorized Adamson to withdraw money from Susan's father's account. Adamson's notes also indicate that he inquired about the cost of shipping his dead aunt to a funeral home in Chicago. For Steve Reeser, it's all coming clear. There was no dead aunt. The body Adamson planned to ship to Chicago was that of Susan O'Neill.
You have to remember that we're gathering evidence in a case where there is no body. We have to face the possibility of perhaps trying to prosecute without a body and prove circumstantially that she was dead.
Three months after Susan O'Neill's disappearance, there is still no sign of her. But investigators feel they must act. When Adamson is deported from the United States, police are waiting at the airport to arrest him and charge him with first-degree murder. Steve Reeser has just made history. Never before has a member of the Toronto Police Force arrested a murder suspect before a victim's body has been found. But his job is far from over. Knowing he must build a strong case, Reeser asks forensic documents analyst Greg Dawson to compare the letter authorizing Adamson to withdraw money from his father-in-law's account with a typewriter ribbon found at the Ohio farmhouse.
The question letter is a letter on Susan O'Neill letterhead, and it's to the Plains Bank of Illinois. And I was asked whether or not the details of this letter are on this typewriter ribbon. And they are. Not only that, but there are mistakes made in the letter that are also on the ribbon. So because of the mistakes and all the particular way that the letter is conformed, I can say that there's absolutely no question that this letter was produced by using this typewriter ribbon.
Reeser now has proof that Adamson is, at the very least, a thief. But can the detective prove that he is a murderer? At Susan's house in Toronto, crime scene analyst John Badowski has another breakthrough.
When I sat down and looked at the bathtub, I realized that it had been polished. It had probably even been vacuumed. And yet the sink to the left of it, just 2 feet to the left of it, looked like a normal sink with toothpaste stains. And I stood back and examined this in my head for probably 5 or 10 minutes and realized this is wrong. And I immediately went downstairs and called one of the homicide investigators, and I called him at home, I believe, and said, I don't know what it is, but the bathtub is involved. And this is why. There's not even a pubic hair, and this is very abnormal. Nobody cleans their bathtub this religiously.
With his daughter's whereabouts still unknown, Susan's father passes away. A month later, a maintenance crew is at work in the ravine behind the father's nursing home. Climbing down the slope, workers encounter a terrible smell. At the bottom of the ravine, they find a duffel bag. Police are called in, along with pathologist Noel McAuliffe.
The police were on scene when I got there. Curiosity led me to rappel down this more or less vertical bank, the nearest I'll ever come to climbing Everest. Never do it again. Going down isn't too bad, coming back up is hell.
The duffel bag contains a jumbled collection of human bones. It has likely been in this spot for months, long enough for the human remains inside to become completely skeletonized. Based on the shape of the pelvis, Noel McAuliffe is able to determine that the bones are those of a woman. But he cannot determine the identity nor the cause of her death.
The remains were brought to the city morgue, and the bones were examined meticulously for nicks, evidence of gunshot injury, evidence of blunt force injury. There was no bony injury. And essentially at this stage, one could say that there was no anatomic cause of death in this woman.
McAuliffe uses dental x-rays to identify the deceased as Susan O'Neill. How did Susan die? Her body is so badly decomposed, investigators fear they may never know. And if they cannot say for certain how Susan met her death, how can they say for certain who killed her? When Adamson learns that his wife's body has been found, he cooks up a new story. He now tells police that he and Susan had been fighting that night. In a rage, she picked up a board and hit him across the head. He blacked out. When he came to, he says that he was lying on top of her and she was dead. Investigators don't believe this story either. They are beginning to piece together their own theory about Adamson and the late Susan O'Neill. Adamson had been living off Susan for years. If their relationship had ended, his free ride would have been over. But if Susan were to simply disappear, Adamson could lay claim to both her estate and eventually her father's as well. So how then did Adamson murder Susan? At the murder trial, investigators testify that they believed Robert Adamson held Susan O'Neill underwater until she drowned. He did an excellent job of destroying trace evidence at the scene. When Adamson was finished, the bathtub gleamed, but he had no way of knowing there was incriminating evidence in a place he hadn't considered. Inside Susan O'Neill's body. For investigators, this is Exhibit A microscopic life form called a diatom. Diatoms are a form of plant life found in water. When someone drowns, their lungs are filled with water, and the microscopic diatoms burst through the lungs into the bloodstream. The diatoms then move rapidly throughout the body, where they ultimately settle in the bone marrow. Noel McAuliffe cuts the thigh bone in half and extracts some marrow. If there are any diatoms to be found, this is where they'll be.
The presence of diatoms in the femoral bone marrow was a strong, if not clear, indication to me that this woman had drowned.
The jury takes just 70 minutes to find Robert Addie Adamson guilty of the second-degree murder of Susan O'Neill. Everyone involved in the case sees Susan the same way, as a fine, upstanding woman tragically cut down in midlife. There is just one thing they don't understand.
The one thing I did find odd was why she would want to be with Robert Adamson. That's the only thing that's puzzling about Susan.
I will trust his judgment, Susan once wrote of Addie in her diary. For I do trust him, and he needs that trust. Susan O'Neill's most admirable quality may have been her faith in other people. The tragic irony of her life is that the person in whom she placed the most faith turned out to be the one who killed her. On September 6, 1991, Judge Nicholson McRae sentenced Robert Adamson to life in prison. He remains behind bars in Kingston Penitentiary. The stories on Exhibit A are based on true cases. The forensic scientists and investigators are the actual individuals who worked on the cases. The names of the guilty are real.